Hello, I am Sweet Gwendolyn. Immediately to my left is Doggy Rita. This is Divine on my t-shirt. And this is Queer Quarantine, day 33, which is Thursday, April 23rd. I have to reach for it in my brain because my laptop is still down. I'm trying to get it repaired under warranty. We'll see what happens, but it means that I'm having to record this on my video camera, so I'm going to have my notes on my phone here. And yeah, let's just get through it. Quite a bit has been happening in the world. It pretty much all boils down to the numbers are going up. Vulnerable people are getting infected and dying. Some governors are mismanaging things very poorly as far as reopening goes. Trump is mismanaging things poorly as far as being president during all this goes. And that's pretty much it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, unfortunately, there just hasn't been any sort of like wacky, offbeat stuff going on. So I don't know what to tell you. I'm just gonna give my best possible presentation because, like I said before I do this, for anyone else, I'm just doing this as a record for me 25 years from now if I want to go back and rewatch these and see how it all unfolded. But I also aim to provide information to other people who want to watch this and see what's going on and perhaps get their news in a less doom and gloom, less painful, heart-wrenching delivery system. So I'm going to do my best, I think, to stay upbeat and chipper, even though, to be clear, my heart is aching for everyone who is affected by this. But it's the situation we're in. I'm going to do my best to run through all the facts. So I always start off with the hard numbers. So in the world, there are 2,682,000 infections and 47,000 deaths. In the US, there have been 756,000 infected and more than 47,000 have died, which incidentally means 47,000 people roughly died in 1 month in this country because of this, which drives me crazy when people are trying to compare it to the flu. The flu does not kill 47,000 people in a month. Here in Travis County, in Texas, just under 22,000 people are infected and 574 have died. And here in Travis County, 1,263 have been infected since this began and 28 people have died. So, on the whole, the numbers on the local level are not ideal, but manageable at the moment, and the city of Boston seems to be doing a pretty good job of managing it, and hopefully they will stick with it. So yeah, I'm gonna take a moment to go over sort of like some worst case scenarios. People were very afraid of how this was gonna rip through prisons and detention centers. So, unfortunately, there are some numbers representing those worst fears coming true right now. I'm just going to start with Texas. It's definitely not the worst, but it's happening. It's definitely happening here. So as of yesterday, which was April 22nd, there are 252 TDCJ employees, staff, and contractors who have tested positive for COVID-19, and 594 inmates who have tested positive. And at the moment, 12 of the employees and 47 of the inmates have recovered, meaning basically almost all of those people, which is just around 750 people, either inmates or staff in Texas, are infected. And it gets a little more dramatic in both Ohio and Arkansas. So in Ohio, coronavirus cases, 1 in 4 cases in the entire state are coming from their prisons, and in particular, a whopping 1,828 cases are inmates at a single prison, being the Marion Correctional Institution, and also 100 staff there have become infected. Similarly, in fact, even more dramatically, 38% of Arkansas's coronavirus cases are concentrated at a maximum security prison, which has a whopping 2,227 infections system-wide, and specifically 850 at the Cummings location. So, also in, of course, that happened news. So far, 7 coronavirus cases have been traced to the voting in Wisconsin so far. That was the one where the Supreme Court mandated that people had to show up and vote in person. That was a horrible decision. The basic idea was that you can't... It is true that generally the precedent is you do not change the rules of an election right before the election. However, there was this huge backlog of people who had already requested the absentee ballots that weren't going to be able to get it, and most of the polling places were closed because the workers were refusing to show up because they're volunteers. Most of them are elderly. So, so that forced people to show up in person. They actually think it's dramatically more, apart from just the obvious, there are people who it's never going to be caught, or they won't be able to prove that's where they got it. They are apparently like about 2 weeks behind on testing in Wisconsin right now. So that number will probably go way up. Then also, the CDC has confirmed that 2 people died of COVID-19 in California weeks before there were any official reports of the disease in the United States at all. Those deaths, they both died at home, respectively, on February 6th and February 17th. Also, on a odd note, 8 lions and tigers have been infected with the virus at the Bronx Zoo. I'm not sure how that happened or came to anyone's attention. And congratulations to the big cats for being able to access corona tests better than some humans, apparently. Also, there have been 2 cats, or maybe 1 cat and 1 dog, I don't see it, like household pets who have been diagnosed with the case. Again, I don't know how that's getting diagnosed, but we learn more and more about the virus. I mean, we had heard that there were a few limited cases in China, so it's happening here too. Also, a case study in China suggests that a restaurant's air conditioning spread the virus throughout a restaurant because they were able to trace a cluster of 9 cases that seemed to have come from one restaurant. The families were all sitting far enough away from each other that they should not have been able to infect each other. The restaurant had air conditioning, and that's basically the conclusion that they're drawing. So, based... well, in part on that, and also just because it's obvious, grocery stores are starting to consider closing to staff only. There's a huge issue where people like to pick stuff up, look at it, put it down, read the ingredients, find the perfect tomato, tap it, listen to it, smell it. You don't do that anymore. And if you have, they'd be switching to online and pickup orders. Instacart people aren't going to be sitting there trying to find the perfect tomato. They're going to grab a tomato and throw it in. And also they're going to be a lot more trained. They'll know the routine. They'll be taking it seriously, as well as the store employees. I think that would be good, but also the obvious concern is that there are people who can't afford the extra fees that are usually involved in that, and there are people without computers, so they better be able to have a way where people can do phone orders, and I don't know, I think it's going to be a mess. I agree, though, I deliberately have not been to a grocery store, but the 2 people have gone for me, one of whom is a friend who works for Instacart, who I just paid directly because fuck Instacart, and I support the workers' strike. But I mean, they both were like, yeah, the grocery stores are totally unsafe. Everyone's way too close to each other. People handle stuff and put it back on the shelf. And so, and a lot of grocery store workers are just dying across the country. So I would support it if they do it, but they really better make sure that people without the internet and without cars are able to get it. Like the pickup, it can't just be we come and do a no contact, throw it in your trunk for you. People without cars need to be able to get it too. So, moving right along. More cheerful news. The CDC has admitted that errors on their part caused contamination, which caused huge delays in testing in this country. Essentially, they just contaminated a bunch of the early tests that they then mailed out to all 50 states for their public health departments, and the tests were totally meaningless. So, thank you, CDC. And just as a side note, I am almost completely certain that the person who is running the CDC is a political Trump appointee who is someone who, at least at one point, believed AIDS was God's wrath for homosexuality. So, just putting it out there, might be a good idea to have someone who's actually familiar with medical science and is not a religious zealot who thinks some people should die in charge. My editorial. All right. So then we're moving into people, governors, officials, reopening things very irresponsibly. Probably the one who's getting the most attention is the governor of Georgia, because he's just trying to open everything in place, even by the federal standards, which were not ideal, but, something, I guess. They said you needed to have a decline in cases for 14 days in a row before you start opening things back up, and he's reopening hair salons, tattoo parlors, and bowling alleys. Like bowling alleys where the whole premise is you stick your finger in a ball where other people stick their fingers. And tattoos, talk about something, you can do that anytime for the rest of your life. It's non-urgent. Nothing bad happens if you don't get a tattoo right away. I appreciate, especially as someone with fine hair who cares a lot about their aesthetic, I can understand why people would want to run out and get their hair done, but you will live if you don't get your hair done, So, anyway, he wants to just reopen everything, and actually what is hilarious to me is that, so first, Trump puts out the guidelines, so then we have all these wingnut protesters, which I'll get to in just a second, over the weekend, who they all think the coronavirus is a hoax, and they want everything to reopen up right now. And so then wingnuts, that's Trump's base. That's his hardcore base right there. So he's like, yeah, what they said, even though they're protesting his own guidelines. And so then all of the governors who were like kind of his sycophants, primarily in the Deep South, were like, yeah, okay, that's what Trump, sure, he put out those guidelines, but now he's supporting the supporters, so we're going to just like open everything up right now, and now Trump's heckling the governors who are opening up too fast. He's just like heckling everyone. He's giving no guidance at all. And the thing that's really messed up about the governor of Georgia is he's the guy who cheated and beat Stacey Abrams. And, God, what I would give to have Stacey Abrams in charge right now. Honestly, if Joe Biden, who I don't like, picks her for his running mate, that would be the only way that could save her not having won the election. But anyway, so this guy, he was the head of the voting board in Georgia, and then he completely rigged everything. He was like out in the open. He passed all this crap. Just everyone saw it, and somehow it was this razor thin victory that was bullshit, and now he's in charge and he's killing everyone. And the thing that's really messed up is that, so all of the he's a Republican. All of the mayors of major cities, though, in Atlanta are Democratic mayors. And he is overriding their local orders to have non-essential businesses closed. He's literally, even completely regardless of what kind of numbers they have right now. And there's one city, I think Augusta, Georgia, that has the biggest outbreak in the whole state, and he's just like forcing them to open up. What is he doing? I mean, it's like he wants to make snowflakes cry or something is the reason he wants to lift this stuff up. So anyway, and then what's really going over poorly is that while black people only make up 27% of the population in Georgia, they comprise 52% of the deaths. So how a lot of people are reading this is that he doesn't care if a bunch of black people die, which is why he is opening the state. Now, that still means a lot of white people are dying too, but I agree. I agree that there's no way that isn't an element in all of this. And yeah, I think he's a pretty terrible person, and hopefully since he's the focus of national scorn right now, he might ease up or at least make exceptions, let the major cities make their own calls. Just so you know what the actual numbers are, there was a national survey that just came out. Only 12% of people think the restrictions go too far. 24% actually think that they aren't going far enough, and then 64% think they're about right. So only a fringe of people think that they are going too far. But that's Trump's fringe, and he loves catering to them. Not to mention, Fox News loves catering to them, possibly far more to the point. And Trump he literally takes his information from Fox News over his actual briefs. He has access to some of the best intelligence and medical information in the world. And he still makes his decisions based on what Sean Hannity says. So that's one of the reasons that's going so badly, and that's one of the reasons that he is artificially opening this country way before it is safe. So, because, Fox News covered the 12% of people in the country who are making noise about wanting it open, and just it's this feedback loop. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Anyway, in similar news, the Las Vegas mayor is getting similar attention. She is every stereotype you can think of as a Southern governor, except for she's the mayor of Las Vegas, and she wants to open everything up, especially the casinos. Well, that's where they make all their money, right? And anyway, she's like, oh, they can just socially distance, and this is during an interview, and they're like, well, how are casinos going to socially distance? She's like, oh, I don't know. That's not my line of business. They can figure it out on their own. So, lots of excellent leadership there. Then also more not awesome news here, followed under, of course, obviously. So what happened was there was this medicine called hydroxychloroquine that early on Trump started touting like it was a miracle cure. He even said it had like a 100% cure rate, and he was doing it because he was like trying to calm people's fears and, oh, there's nothing to worry about. There's this medicine that it takes care of everything. What? People don't want to prescribe this medicine? It's a conspiracy. The liberals are trying to keep you from getting the medicine that you need. And anyway, the first study on it came out so far, and they found that not only did it do nothing to improve outcomes, it actually, the people in the group who got it had a higher death rate. So, and on a similar note, there was literally a world class international expert on vaccines who is the head of the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, which has been handling a lot of the U.S. coronavirus response. And he was actually appointed by Trump, which is why Trump fired him in retaliation for suggesting that perhaps we should research this medication before we start prescribing it to everyone. He didn't jump onto this blind, oh, Trump says it's a miracle cure, prescribe it to everyone, which, by the way, caused shortages for the people who have lupus and rheumatoid arthritis who actually need it. So, in short, that was handled poorly. Then, just on a miscellaneous Trump exploiting the virus note, Trump has, and I will have to go more in depth in reading it. There's just so many details regarding the story, but basically he's trying to shut down all immigration. He's signed an executive order that stops immigration for 60 days. But the thing is, if I understand correctly, this is only for the people who are already in the country. So it does nothing. It's like if you're in the country and you're just waiting for a status change, they won't give it to you. I mean, that has nothing to do with the virus. And then, to top it off, for people who are U.S. citizens who are married to non-citizens, they're not giving them the $1,200 stimulus check. Like, the citizen isn't getting their $1,200 stimulus check. It's mind-boggling. But the general speculation is that he saw his polls drop 6%, which rather rapidly, and he panicked and he went straight to the anti-immigrant rhetoric because that is red meat for his base. So, and regarding the not getting the stimulus check if your spouse is a immigrant, that is, you may have a social security number if you have a work visa and you're an immigrant, but if you don't, you don't have one. So it's for anyone who, they're filing a joint return, but they're the only, like, they're married, so they're filing a joint return, but the citizen is the only one with a social security number. Those are the citizens that aren't getting their $1,200, which they're entitled to. Because Trump. Alright, so wrapping it up. Alright, so we're past all of the political stuff. They're learning more and more about the virus all the time, and the more we learn about it, the more we realize we don't know. It, in the very beginning, was generally just understood to be a really nasty infection, that you had a high fever and it attacked your lungs, and then a little while into it, they were like, oh, well, there's this other symptom where you suddenly lose your sense of smell and taste. And then everyone's